Recently, I finished reading a book by Jay Thorn, who is a big name in the self-publishing space, called Co-Writing with ChatGPT AI-Powered Storytelling, and he had some really cool, really interesting prompts that I thought I would test out with all of you. Let's get into it. Hello everyone, we are back in ChatGPT today to test some prompts by Jay Thorn. I haven't had the privilege of meeting Jay Thorn personally, but I think I've interacted with him a little bit online. He's a big name in the indie author space, has been around for a long time, and he wrote this book called Co-Writing with ChatGPT AI-Powered Storytelling, and I read it. It's a good book. I will link to it below. He in the book he had a couple of really cool prompts that I thought we'd test out today, and this isn't all of the prompts that he had, but it's a good chunk that can be really fun. Now, if you've seen my video on writing a book with ChatGPT, some of these will feel kind of familiar, but in a different format, a different approach, rather. It's still kind of taking that progressive approach where you start with the concept, then you move to a synopsis, and then you kind of get bigger and bigger as you go along. But in this case, the way that we get there is a little different, and I'm really excited to test these things out. I have not actually tested these myself yet, so we are going to be doing this together. First, we start with genre research. The prompt that he has for that, let me just copy it into here, says, tell me what you know about, and then insert subgenre of main genre, fiction, including conventions, tropes, and obligatory scenes. So I'm going to say, we'll say colonization, science fiction, and then we can get rid of that. So we just tweak the prompt just like that, including conventions, tropes, and obligatory scenes. See what it gives us. All right, we actually got some really cool information about the genre here. This would be a great way to do some of your initial research on a given genre. It tells us, so colonization science fiction is a subgenre of science fiction that focuses on the exploration and settlement of new planets or regions in space by humans or other sentient beings. We got conventions like technological advancements, new planets, alien species, socio-political commentary, tropes of terraforming, first contact, survival, lost colony, obligatory scenes. We have the arrival, the first contact, the struggle for survival, climactic confrontation, etc. Having read a little bit of colonization fiction, this is pretty close. It's a little general, but it's pretty close. It did give some examples that aren't quite right. I would not describe Dune as a colonization fiction. There are elements certainly, but in modern colonization, I think it's a little bit different. But it is true that Star Trek: The Next Generation often explored themes of colonization. That is definitely true. So pretty cool. Pretty good way to do some genre research. So now we're gonna move on to character creation. So his prompt for this is, we're going to write and I'm going to say colonization science fiction series together. Before we begin, we need to create a protagonist. What questions do I need to answer for you to develop the character? Here are some ways we can develop a character: a basic backstory, their strengths and weaknesses, a tragic flaw or wound, wants and needs. Also, the protagonist needs a unique quirk or behavior that will make the character memorable to the reader. Include a unique quirk or behavior. So let's see what it gives us for that. All right, so it's given us some questions here. So it hasn't built the character yet because we did ask it to ask us questions. And so these are questions that we could go through and answer. I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to say, give me, this isn't one of his prompts. I'm just going to do this to pass time. A sample character that answers all of those questions. All right, our protagonist is Dr. Kira Novak, born and raised on a sprawling metropolis on Earth. Early life was dominated by overpopulation, environmental degradation, and a deep-seated desire to escape. Okay, this is cool. Kira is a very generic, highly overused name, but we'll just keep it for the purposes of this video. And now here's where it started to get interesting, and I really liked what J. Thorne did, we're going to go ahead and just leave that the way it is and move on to a series arc. That's right. We're going to plan the entire series about this. And here is the prompt that he uses. Using the hero's journey as defined by Christopher Vogler, create a 12-book series, each book mapped to the 12 stages of the hero's journey from the perspective of the protagonist. Include the overarching story arc, subplots and character arcs, a primary focus or theme for each book, and ensure continuity and progression. I'm really excited to see where this one goes because I would love to be able to quickly map out a 12-book series like this, and it makes really a lot of sense to map the series out according to the hero's journey. You could do the same thing with a trilogy and say map out a trilogy based on the 3-act structure, so each act corresponds to each book of the trilogy. But let's just see what this gives us with a 12-stage book based on the hero's journey. All right, so it's given us 12 books, but I've noticed with this particular prompt, unfortunately, it has kind of all of this could be fit inside one book. The ordinary world. So book 1 is Kira works in a lab on Earth, dreaming of a future beyond the overcrowded and dying planet. Primary focus establishing Kira's world and her dissatisfaction with it. That's fine, but that's the beginning of a book. That's not the whole book. And so we would want to maybe work with ChatGPT a little further or change the prompt a bit, because I don't think this works. I do think that this is the way the AI is going to go most of the time, not creating separate books. But you could take this and go dig a little deeper with each individual book and see what that could look like. And we'll do a little bit of that now. But the sad reality is this could all be one book. And so we would want to think a little bigger, build the stakes a little bit so that it's this huge series arc. And all of this could be condensed into one book. So that's a little unfortunate. But I do like that it has followed the prompt in that it has added a subplot and it's added the primary focus. And so that's kind of cool. That's something I definitely want to add in. And you can follow the subplot of her relationships with her colleagues and blossoming into a full-on relationship here. So that was actually kind of a cool little twist and definitely something I'll be using in the future. So that's the cool thing about these prompts is you learn some things and then you find other things that maybe don't work quite as well. So next we're going to move on to the Pixar pitch. And first of all, I'm just going to ask it what the Pixar, if it knows what the Pixar pitch is. And if you haven't heard of this, I believe it's also called the Story Spine. Here's the pitch. Are you familiar with the Pixar pitch? Here is more information. Once upon a time, every day, one day, because of that, until finally. That's the basics of the Pixar pitch. And I'm just going to ask it if it knows what that is. Yep, it's a narrative framework. Oh, and it's actually giving us the Pixar pitch of our story. I didn't even ask it to do that. That's nice. Okay. So it's done this on all 12 books. And now I'm just going to ask it. So it's already done this. The next pitch from J. Thorne's book was to ask it to create a Pixar pitch for the overall 12-book series. It's kind of done that. So now we're going to say, create a Pixar pitch for the first book of the 12-book series. Once upon a time, there was a dedicated exobiologist named Kira Novak living in an overcrowded, pollution-ridden Earth, haunted by the loss of her brother to pollution-related illnesses. She worked tirelessly. One day, she was selected as part of a pioneering team. She had to confront her fear, leaving behind the world she knows. She faced a struggle, the weight on the world, boarded the spaceship, leaving her family life behind and stepping into the unknown. I believe if I look up here at book 1 and 2, so this is straight into book 2 and 3 territory because guess what? There's not enough material here in book 1 to really make a full book. But it hasn't gone through the entire 12-book series. It's not drawing from that. It does know that it needs to be a little shorter. So perhaps if we had gone through that 12 book series and fleshed it out a little bit more, and then we could have fed it the first book and say, here, write a Pixar pitch for that, that would work. This isn't bad though. From what it's given us, it's just not, it's using the material it created for books 2 and 3 in this Pixar pitch, which is understandable given how AI works. All right. Next on the list is let's create an antagonist for book 1. This should be a character who is character archetype plus a sentence or two about the character's motivation. So let's say let's actually make this interesting and say the mentor figure who is secretly an antagonist and wants Kira to complete her mission for ulterior motives that he has. I don't have the brain space right now to figure out what his ulterior motives are, so let's just use that. And we're getting a character profile. Dr. Malcolm Vance. Dr. Vance is a seasoned astrobiologist and the head of the department in which Kira works. Highly respected figure. Motivation. Secretly has a significant financial stake in a powerful interstellar mining corporation. Sounds general, but definitely looks like it works. And this is pretty good information to be starting with. And now we're going to move on to the next prompt, which is, are there any other characters we need to include in the cast right now? Please create the explanation of the secondary characters, including the character archetypes as defined by the hero's journey. I do love this reliance on the hero's journey because I feel like it's really hard to go wrong with the hero's journey. All right, we have Allie, a spacecraft engineer and vital part of the crew. Becomes a trusted ally and friend. Doesn't mention... Oh, sorry, ally. Sorry, her name is Allie. She's an ally. Then we have the Herald. So it does know what all the hero's journey archetypes are. That's great. Mission commander, shapeshifter is Dr. Lena Zhou. I'm sorry. Astrogeologist, threshold guardian. So it is actually going with some archetypes here. This is actually a really useful prompt, I think. Really good way to round out your cast in a way that sticks with the character archetypes, which can be a huge help, I feel like. So we got 4 of them here. So that's in addition to the main protagonist and the antagonist, which I think is a solid way to round out the cast. So definitely an A+ on the character creation prompts here. I think those are really fantastic. All right. Now we're going to ask it about the save the cat structure. Now I happen to know that AI does know what the save the cat structure is, but we're just going to ask it because this is the prompt that J. Thorne has. Are you familiar with the Save the Cat story structure? And it should give us a series of 15 beats. Yep, here they are. All right, so we have these 15 beats. These are not necessarily, like, I wouldn't make these into a chapter each or anything like that, but they are, I would call them obligatory scenes that need to take place at some point during the course of the story. They're kind of these benchmarks that you really want to hit, which is what we have pretty much in this next prompt, which says, using all of the information and characters we've generated for book 1, please create the outline for the 15 obligatory scenes from Save the Cat structure at the appropriate word count target of 1,000 words. Label them with their Save the Cat label. Please create the outline using 3 bullets for each scene based on the 3-story method structure, which is... And by the way, the 3-story method structure is J. Thorne's own structure, which he has a book about that. I highly recommend you read it, which is conflict equaling the inciting incident of the scene, choice, the difficult choice facing the protagonist in which the choice isn't apparently clear, consequence at the end of the scene, and sometimes end the scene as a cliffhanger and make the consequence the conflict of the following scene. This seems like a lot of information to be feeding ChatGPT right now. I'm not sure it will be able to handle all of this, especially not for all 15. Maybe if you fed it 1 beat at a time, it could kind of figure this out, but we'll see. We'll see how it does. Okay, we've got the whole thing, and it actually did better than I thought it would. We have the opening image. Kira in her lab sees a new report about increasing pollution levels. It's using this three-story method structure. She must decide whether to continue her research or react to the news. She chooses to focus on her work, symbolizing her deep-rooted desire for a new beginning. So this isn't perfect. I would definitely modify this myself, but it's given us a good starting point. The theme stated: Kira's colleague questions the purpose of their research given the state of Earth. Kira must decide whether to confront the reality of their situation or maintain her optimism. She expresses her hope for a better future, revealing the story's theme of hope and new beginnings. So really cool structure and a cool way to frame each scene so that it's doing specific things. And as I said, I would modify this heavily to make it into something workable, but it's definitely good. I did have to prompt it to continue because it ran out of space, and but it eventually got through all 15 in the structure that it was asked to. So I'm actually semi-impressed by this. I think it could have been better had we gone through and spent the time to really flesh out the synopsis of the first book and then fed it that and then asked it to give the overall 15 Save the Cat beats. But this is pretty good. All right, now moving on to, this is the last prompt. We have the chapter list. And I'm just going to add this in here. Please create a bulleted list of all 50 chapters. He specifically said 50 chapters, making sure to label all 15 of the Save the Cat scenes. Provide a one-sentence overview for each additional scene. Note, check for redundancy and plot inconsistencies. That's a good one to add, I think, because it will often make itself redundant. But let's see what that does. Again, this seems like almost more than AI can handle, in my opinion. But we are getting the 15 beats here, and it is filling in some of the gaps. So that's kind of cool that it's even doing that. Okay, so it did exactly as asked, and the result of these prompts is I figured out that maybe I am not giving ChatGPT enough credit. Maybe it can do more than I think it can, because this is actually pretty good. It gives us the individual Save the Cat beats when appropriate, but it does fill in the gaps between them, which is good. And I was reading through them, and they're not perfect, but it's actually way better than I thought they would be. I thought there would be a lot more redundancy, or it would be stretching one scene into 3 or 4 or 5. But each one does actually appear to work as its own individual scene. And we've got eventually 50 scenes here, or chapters, depending on how you do things. If you do one scene per chapter, this is 50 chapters. And it actually looks pretty good, and this would be a good jumping off point to really flesh out each scene to make it work. But I like this. I might try this on my next book, honestly. But so far, I really think this is great. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you in the next video.